Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's installment of the Eva K. Bowlby Public Library with Greene County Historical Society's L.K. Evans History Book Reading Club. Right now we are at the Shriver Cemetery in Monongalia County, West Virginia, and the reason we are here is to talk about a section of the book that we did not include in this week's reading assignments. This section is on Statler's Fort, and if you guys can see the expansive field behind me, that's where Statler's Fort was. Now, Statler's Fort was actually a proper military fort during the frontier times, 1770s, 1780s. It was used through the Revolutionary War, although not necessarily for things related to the Revolutionary War. There was a major attack on Statler's Fort. I believe it was in 1777, and here in a few minutes we're actually going to be at another site just down the road where there's a marker commemorating that attack, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Also today we're doing something very exciting. We have a whole crew from the Greene County Historical Society Museum out here with us today. We've got Dave Jones and his wife Barb, their daughter Janice Rohanna and granddaughter Grace Rohanna, and we're going to be putting flags on veterans' graves at various cemeteries in the area. We'll be hitting up Cemetery, which is where the monument that we're going to visit is, and again, that's literally just out of sight at the other end of that field. We'll also be going to Garrard's Fort Cemetery, putting some flags out and talking about some of the people that are buried there and showing you guys some of the older headstones. And then we'll be going to Greensboro, where we'll be putting new flags on John Minor's grave. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming along for the ride. Today's going to be a lot of fun. To talk a little bit more about frontier forts, as I said, Statler's Fort was actually a proper military fort. Now, when we talk about forts in the 18th century, a lot of times what we're talking about is more of a fortified house, like a stone house or a log cabin that has the ability to be kind of shut up and defended. Not necessarily always thinking in the terms of buildings that had a stockade around it. Some did, some didn't. But more often than not, when we talk about frontier forts, it's small cabins that just have the ability to be fortified. But Statler's Fort, Garrard's Fort, Fort Jackson, and a lot of others, especially a lot of what we read about in this week's assignments, were proper forts that served military purposes and were a little bit above and beyond just a fortified home. Just up the road in Blacksville, there was Fort Worley. That was a fortified home. In fact, if anybody's familiar where the ponds are in Blacksville, that's exactly where Fort Worley was. It stood until the 1960s when they actually constructed the pond. There are still a few surviving photos that show that, and probably not a whole lot of those buildings survived into the realm of photography as we understand it. Most, once the need for them was gone, they kind of were either reutilized for another purpose or taken away completely. So thank you for joining us. We're going to continue on about our trip. Thank you. Okay, so we just left the site of the Shriver Cemetery, which is just over this little knoll, and now we're at the Price Cemetery. Now, Interesting thing about both of these two cemeteries is they both relate to Statler's Fort. Now again, we did not include Statler's Fort in the reading assignments for this week because I really wanted to kind of talk about this in the video. So if you want to read the section in the book on Statler's Fort, it is on page 67. Statler's Fort, interestingly enough, even though it is just across the line in West Virginia, it is just on the southern shore of the banks of Dunkard Creek. Interestingly enough, John Minor, whose grave we're going to be visiting later today, was commander of Statler's Fort for a period during the time of the American Revolution. Now, interestingly enough, there was an interesting attack that happened here at Statler's Fort, and I'm going to read you a little section of that right now. Way back in the dim vista of departed time, a scene of carnage was portrayed on the waters of Dunkard Creek, unsurpassed in atrocity, which beggars description. In the summer of 1778, we find a large, thrifty settlement in the valley of Dunkard, in the vicinity of the site now occupied by Blacksville. On a side and short distance below Blacksville was constructed a fort, which was the general rendezvous for the entire neighborhood in times of savage invasion. It was called Statler's Fort, I presume, from the name of the individual among the improvement on which it was located. That individual was John Statler. If I have it, I believe I am going to include a photo of his grave at the Shriver Cemetery in this video, so that'll be coming up after this segment. It was situated about 3/4 of a mile south of the state line. I believe there is a post office bearing the name of the fort at or near its original site. How long this settlement had existed here prior to the wholesale slaughter I'm about to record, I have no means of knowing. Doubtless, some daring pioneers had explored the country long before, by dint and earnest enterprise, had gradually worked up the populous community of whom I am about to relate the very unhappy fate. While numerous bodies of hostile Indians were depredating on the settlements along Booth's and Cobra's creeks and committing terrible slaughter and devastation, the Statler Fort people became apprised of their danger and assembled themselves in the fort for mutual defense and protection. Peradventure, several days had elapsed, and no enemy appearing, the men ventured forth with gun in hand and hoe in the other to till the growing crops and secure subsistence for their families which were habitating at the fort. For the better defense against the industrious attacks from detached gangs of a large party of savages known to have been on the warpath, the settlers all went together and by helping each other for help in return, kept up a kind of constant organization for each other's protection. How long they had been operating thus is not known, but long enough, doubtless, to begin to feel a sense of returning security, and therefore to relax their vigilance in guarding against surprise. One evening, after having accomplished a good day's work undisturbed, they butchered some hogs and set off for the fort in high spirits to gladden the eyes of their wives and little ones with their safe return, as well as the provisions which they were bringing to relieve them from gnawing hunger. During the afternoon, however, over 100 stealthy, deadly savages crept noiselessly throughout the forest and ambushed themselves on either side of the pathway which led to the fort. Crouching there with deadly intent, these highway demons breathlessly awaited the coming of the devoted band of frontiersmen. Unconscious of the awful fate awaiting them, the happy, unsuspecting party of honest woodsmen marched gaily on, right into the very jaws of death. All at once the whole countryside seemed ablaze with the lightning splash, and every tangle and the dense thickets adjacent belched forth the fearful death warrant of rifle shot. Many fell to rise no more, but those who escaped the first volley rallied with an undismayed bravery and returned fire. The unequal contest could no longer be sustained, but fighting their way through the large army of infuriated savages, the few who were yet unharmed made their escape to the fort, leaving 18 of their companions dead in the road. This monument is dedicated to those 18 brave people who were slain that day. It reads, Price Memorial Cemetery. This tablet is dedicated to the memory of 18 Revolutionary War soldiers killed near here by the Indians in 1778. Jacob Statler, of whom Statler's Fort was named, James Piles, Joseph Wade, John McDaniels, Michael Kinderling, and 13 other nameless individuals. This tablet was placed here by the Elizabeth Ludington Pagans Chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution, through the generosity of A.C. Price and William Price family. So thank you for joining us. We'll take a few pictures in the cemetery and show you guys it as well. And then we will be on to Gerard's Fort Cemetery, where we will be placing new graves for new flags on graves for veterans. Thank you very much. Bye. Okay, we're here at Gerard's Fort Cemetery, and right now I'm beside the grave of George Morris, who's one of the most early settlers in this area and a veteran of the Revolutionary War. And the Greene County Historical Society crew is going to be replacing a lot of the flags in the cemetery here today. So this is going to be a short video clip, but after this you're actually going to see pictures of a lot of the graves here, specifically some of the early settlers whose names were mentioned in the section you read in the book that deals with Gerard's Fort. So thanks for joining us, and here are some photos. Thank you. Bye. And this is our last stop of the day. We were actually going to come place new flags on John Minor's headstone, but thankfully somebody beat us to the chase. So whoever put these flags out, I thank you. I thank you as a descendant of John Minor, myself, and as the director of the Greene County Historical Society. It's nice seeing people take an interest in preserving our history. So thank you, whoever you were. Again, this is the grave of John Minor. John Minor was the father of Greene County. He's the one responsible for the act which separated Greene County from Washington County on February 9th, 1796. And we're here at the old cemetery on 3rd Street in Greensboro. And again, you guys read about Greensboro, so we're actually going to take some pictures and you'll see some of the graves of some of the county's earliest residents. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking part in this book club, and we will see you next week. Bye.